To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out. To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Oh, hello, world. Hey, welcome to Comic Book News. It's me, Dan Shaheen, Superman's pal. Today, oh man, we got a great stream for you. I got somebody really important to comics. Been in the news more recently. Some say this man may have the best exit timing of anyone in the history of comics, as he made a move and left DC Comics right before basically the entire comics world exploded, right? Or imploded, or whatever it's in the process of doing. This guy got out of Dodge before everything hit the fan, if you know what I'm talking about. So today we're going to talk to this guy, Dan Didio. Oh man, I'm excited. I got so many questions to ask him, so many things. And I know you do too. I know there's a lot of people out there got questions for Dan Didio, but as you may or may not know, from this show, we don't watch the comments during the conversation. We're too busy concentrating on what each other are saying and engaging in a real conversation between two human beings. That's unusual on YouTube, I know, but bear with me. At the end of the show, though, we're going to have a section all about the comments, right? We'll bring you in. We'll let you talk. We'll ask some questions. We'll see what Dan says. We'll go from there. Oh, well, I'm sorry. This did not go live on Facebook. Sorry, Facebook. Anyway, we're live on YouTube. Anyhow, I just wanted to say, sorry, I got distracted there for a second, guys. What I want to say is that we've got a killer show for you tonight. We got a lot to say. But first, I want to go over just a couple of little things. The rules, man. These are the rules. I've talked about the rules before, but I never codified them before. These are the official rules of Comic Book News. All right, the rules are, number one, don't lie. All right, tell the truth, right? Say what you mean, say what you feel, speak from the heart. Dan wanted to know, did I mean emotional truth or actual truth or metaphysical truth? Man, I mean all of the above. Speak the truth. Say what you mean. Number two, have fun. What is this show? This is not a public service announcement. This is a show for entertainment. This is for people who like comics and the business of comics and business and talking about comics and talking about business and talking about the business of comics. So that's what we're going to do. Number three is be nice. Now, the important thing is there's an order to these rules, right? Number one is the most important. Number two is second. Number third is the most important. So if you got to be a little less than nice to tell the truth, that might have to happen. But I personally think there's a way to do all of these things and keep all of these rules in mind, keep everybody happy. We're going to find out right now as I bring in, for the very first time on the show, and I hope not the last, Mr. Dan Didio. Hey, welcome to Comic Book News, Dan.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. And it is the first time, and hopefully we'll do it again, that's for sure. Well, let's see how this one goes first, okay?
Yeah, no, wait a minute. Don't speak too soon because, oh man, I had so many like jokey potential names for this. Do we call it D&D? Do we call it hot Dan on Dan action as you like it? Or maybe it's just a Dan to Dan conversation. That's what we're going to try to have.
Dan. That's right. D to D conversation.
All right, so let's do it, Dan. So Dan Didio, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming, first of all.
Thank you.
So you're most well known for your recent departure from DC Comics. We're going to get into that a little bit. We're probably not going to dive super deep into that because, man, so much has been said. What has been spoken, but we'll ask a couple questions. You can feel free to answer, not answer, whatever, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, guys, about the chats. So the only exception to the no chats that we're going to show during this is super chats, right? If you want to throw some money at this show, oh, brother, we're going to make it rain, and we're going to bring in, the $1 million super chat, right? But the rule is this. If you pay, we're going to grind the show to the halt. I'm going to grab the brakes, and I'm going to pull it, and we're going to pull up that super chat. We might answer it. We might not. It's going to get flashed. But if you want to get yours flashed again, you got to pay more than the previous person paid, right? So if one person pays $1, you got to pay more to get it up there again. And that's going to escalate and increase. And oh my gosh, super chat escalation. So
tell me something. Do you take money for not asking questions? I can throw some in there.
Oh man, damn, we've never tried that before, but heck, I'm willing to try just about anything. So let's get into this, Dan. I got a list of topics, man, and there's some we're going to go deeper into than others. I just want to start with.
Sure.
So you made your entry sort of into the media business, into television, and I read 1981. You got into TV. You're most well known for working on a Canadian show known as Reboot, which is really near and dear to my heart personally. I really enjoyed that show. Tell me a little bit about that, your TV experience, and what led you into comics.
Well, my like I said, I did actually I was probably in television longer than I was in comics. I was in TV for about 20 years. I started in 1981 as a page at CBS. I used to work for CBS News. I used to do some local sports shows. I used to do audience seating for a lot of key shows at the time. I actually worked on a show, Kate and Allie, for a period of time, doing some work on that. Then I did special events. New Year's Eve show, Thanksgiving Day parade, over that. Then from CBS, I went over to ABC. I was in station relations for a while. Did a couple of years of that. Then I did 3 years of publicity with the soap operas. So I worked with a lot of the talent in the soaps, which was always fun because one of the things that was interesting for me was I always was a big comic fan. I always loved comics. So I always found ways to work comics into my business. So if you go back, if you were a fan of Valiant Comics in the early 90s, there's an issue of Second Life of Dr. Mirage. We did a crossover with one of our actors, and that was a special moment for me, as you can only imagine. Then from publicity, I went into ABC Children's. I was running the development for their children's schedule for a few years. Then I went up to Mainframe. Did a year with story editing, writing for Reboot, and then ultimately becoming their senior VP of creative affairs for the company and opening the LA office. And then I did a lot of back and forth. I was bi-coastal for a number of years. Got a little tired of flying. Was on a plane out of Newark on the morning of September 11th. Got stuck in Canada for a week, and that was interesting. Made you rethink about what you wanted to do. So I wanted to get back on the East Coast and work back on the East Coast. Ironically, I got a job at DC and there for 18 years. It was a lot. They were a lot longer than I ever thought I would be, to be perfectly honest.
I meant to ask one other question. How about, let's go back a little bit before that. Let's go to young Danny for a second. Young Danny D. Danny, what you talked about loving comics before and you got into TV. What was your comics thing? What was what scratched your itch?
Well, as I don't know if people know this, I was actually a big monster fan. My sister was a big horror fan, and we used to watch all the creature features and chill.
Sorry, Dan.
No problems. And actually, my sister was also friends with some of the people in the horror industry. She was friends with John Zachary, Forrest J. Ackerman. So I got a chance to meet Forrest J. Ackerman when I was 10 years old. I got a chance to wear the Bela Lugosi Dracula ring. They put me as a Monster of the Month in Famous Monsters.
Okay, Dan, I gotta bring this up because I was gonna bring this up later. So that brings me right into Svengoolie for a second.
Yes.
Just like this is my show, so I get to jump around for a second, dude. I heard you wrote all those Svengoolie comic ads that were in there, and that Svengoolie was sort of like your thing. You love the monster movies. See, chuck me for a second about Svengoolie.
You know what happened? We were at C2E2 and wanted to meet Svengoolie because I was a fan of the show. I love those types of shows. And I'm waiting online and actually became friends with, started chatting out with one of the producers, and then he found out who I was, and then I met Sven, and I found out that he was a big monster fan, naturally, and we became along the way. And his love of comics, my love of monsters, we just found a way to work it together. So there was a guy in my office at DC, Matt Keller, knew this, and he ended up making a deal between DC and MeTV, and then ultimately that's how the comic ended. But I have to give full credit. Jim Roche and Svengoolie, Rich Kaz, they did all the gag stuff in that. I just did the layout of the story and the outline for the story. They did all their own dialogue and jokes. I mean, who can write gems like that except them?
I was going to say, Dan, I don't know if you're trying to distance yourself or what are you trying to do?
No, actually, it was honestly, truly, and it's funny, of all things, when you think of working in comics for 18 years and all the great people I met and all the things that we got a chance to do, one of my real highlights is working with Sven.
I
never had more fun. What?
Those kind of shows, like local afternoon, local TV shows, Cartoon Cavalcade or Movie of the Week or whatever. That's a big inspiration for this show. That's the kind of show that I grew up watching and kind of loving too. So I'm vibing you on that one, Dan.
Yeah, no, but it's my love of comics. My love of cartoons. I was a big kid, loves cartoons. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to work in animation. And ultimately, they triangulated into comics in a way. I didn't really collect superhero comics. I collected all the monster ones, Monsters on the Prowl, House of Mystery, House of Secrets. That's the stuff I really loved. And I always joke, I say Zemu the Titan is the one that got me into the Marvel universe, as well as getting into the DC universe. I came in by the way of the monsters.
I mean, what an era to be a lover of monsters, right? Like you had it coming from all sides. All right, Dan. So you were young, you loved comics. You got into TV, you made some cartoons. Reboot is a genuine classic, beloved by, lots and lots of people.
Yeah.
As a computer guy, too, I got to say, it was one of the first computer animated series, if not the first, maybe.
It was the first.
And very, for what it was, very true to, it wasn't cringy in that technology way that sometimes shows are. It had a really... a fairly reasonable, technological bent. It was kind of real stuff they were using in there.
Oh, listen, the people at Mainframe Entertainment, which were the ones that created Reboot, I mean, they were brilliant. They were geniuses. They were crazy. They were inventive. They were literally making it up as we go along. And that was one of the most amazing things, one of the great periods of time for me, because we were out there selling computer animation to people who didn't know what it meant. The only comparables they had was Toy Story and Ants, which are multi-million-dollar movies, and we're trying to do TV. And the level of dedication, the level of painstaking work that went into those shows, some of the great moments of my life working. And we're up in Vancouver, studios up in Vancouver, and these guys literally would sleep at their computers, they're working at the computer desks in sleeping bags. And while they were rendering scenes, they would fall asleep at their desk, and the render would be done, and they wake up and start animating again. I mean, you can't get much crazier than that. But it was a special time because we knew we were doing something great, and it was funny because when we were writing the show and doing the show, I always remember things like they got a new program. The day the water program came in, that they could get a program that can simulate water in the show. All of a sudden, we're writing scenes to put water in the show because we were so excited about trying out the program and see how it works. I mean, a lot of fun stuff in those days. A lot of good times.
What I liked about that show though was the writing. You could put flashy computer animation on anything and it could be okay or not okay, but the writing was really fun and engaging, and the characters were good, and it was that was solid. And I feel like being on a show like that had such a good reputation, built up your name, gave you a name, and helped you on your intro to comics. Because man, when you came to DC Comics, you came right in, I believe, in 2002. From my research, it said as vice president of editorial.
Yes.
And writer for Superboy, starting in 1994. So tell me about that. How did you make the jump? How did you come to DC, and then how did that work?
Two separate incidents. I was writing in Superboy with Jimmy Palmiotti before the process started on the interviews and all that. And I have a couple of funny stories. If you got a time for a story. So here's my story. So my story is that Jimmy had some success writing Deadpool for a period of time, and he was starting to go from inker to writer. And he and I were friends way back when. We knew each other back in Brooklyn. And we started to submit ideas and concepts together. I was still working at ABC, so this is something I was doing for fun with Jimmy. And ultimately, what happens is we start submitting ideas, and things are turned down and not. And then finally, somebody comes to us and say they want to buy, or they're interested in developing one of our ideas. Ultimately, what happens is that we pitch an idea, which was a Guardian idea. And we sell that, and they're developing it. And they say, "Listen, we got the Guardian, and we need a superhero in there with it." So Jimmy and I add Superboy into the Guardian story, and then it comes back and says, "Yeah, we love this. Now we want to see more Superboy and make him a co-part and basically a co-star in it." So we add that, and they come back and they go back. They said, "Listen, we love everything about your pitch except the Guardian. Could you take the Guardian out and just leave the Superboy part?"
Nobody likes the Guardian.
And I never forgot. I called Jimmy. I call up Jimmy and I go, "Jimmy, are we writing Superboy?" Like I'm scratching my head. Like, "Are we writing Superboy?" He just goes, "Just be quiet. Let's turn in the script." And that's how we got on Superboy.
Okay. Well, you know what? Whatever gets you in, right? That'll work. You'll do what you could. You got your foot in the door. You must have proven yourself as a reliable writer, somebody who could get along, who could deliver on time and deliver good stories, right? So you got off. You went for the job of VP.
There's stories there too.
Okay, so that's what we're here for, Dan. How'd you make the transition then? You were a writer, a first-time writer of comics, and you made the transition to vice president of editorial.
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
Again, two separate instances. So here I am, we're writing Superboy. And again, like I said, it was just after 9/11, and I was pretty determined to get back on the East Coast and settle over there again. So ultimately what happens is that I meet a friend of mine who has a lot of good connections around in the industry and all that. I'm going to meet him for dinner, and he's sitting there with Paul Levitz. And I'm looking, and I know Paul because Paul and I had some interactions when I was at ABC. When I was in ABC Children.
Who was at that time, just for the audience here, he was the publisher of DC Comics at that time.
Yes, he was, exactly. Publisher of the comics. And so what happened was I had known Paul and Jeanette from when I would developed Metal Men as an animated series back with ABC before Disney purchased ABC. So I knew Paul from that. And ultimately what happened is I go sit down with Paul, and our mutual friend says basically, "Dan, you're looking for a job on the East Coast and you know comics. Paul, you're looking for somebody with outside experience who also knows comics. Why don't you two have dinner? I'm going to leave you alone and leave." So I sat down with Paul, and we just started talking comic books. And over the next 3 months, in about 6 interviews, which I met with Paul about 6 times over 3 months, he didn't have a job in mind for me per se, but he knew he wanted me at the company. So over the period of time, we helped just talk about it, and he came up with the position of VP of editorial, which for the most part was just an ombudsman, just sitting in the middle of things, trying to see how to make the different imprints work better together and just be a little more talent relations. And it was all brand new to me. And honestly, it was the first year was a big learning experience, as you can only imagine. I mean, but I did a lot of things at Paul's request. I did a breakdown of the first 5 years of Marvel to deconstruct how Stan built a universe, to see how we can bring some of those tactics to the DC and how to build something from ground up. I did that. I did a full breakdown of the structure on how the departments work together and how to create better workflow systems and things of that nature. And to be honest, it was by the time of the end of that first year, it was extraordinarily frustrating because you had a lot of responsibility and no authority. So you were in there trying to make things work, but it was by sheer will more so than given the full authority to get things done. So I actually thought after my first year I was going to leave. And actually, I was pretty much had pretty much a letter of resignation put together. But in conjunction with that, I put together a a plan. And I said, because Paul was very gracious, gave me a lot of opportunity, which I was thankful for. So I said, here, listen, I'm not sure if I'm going to be the right guy here or not, but if you really want to make this place work, here's a plan. And I laid it in front of him. And he sat there and read it right in front of me. He goes, before you think about leaving, here's what I'll tell you to do. He goes, there's a couple of fixes on it, but you make these changes. And I'll do everything you have on the paper except a couple of things. And he goes, with one exception, he goes, you got to take the executive editor spot. And I'm like, did you just make me executive editor at DC Comics? And all of a sudden, it was just that moment. Like my head was already moving on to other things, and I just stopped short. And I was like, wow. And when people go to you, if you were a kid, you had 3 or 4 jobs that you wanted to be ever since you were a child, right? I got close to one of them working in children's programming, but this was the one. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like,
Right, sure.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, and you get that sense like, I don't know what to do. And the level of responsibility, the level of everything that came with it was scary, because you had to basically put your money where your mouth is. Here you are, you're making suggestions, but now you have to implement them.
Okay, well, Dan, you did that, man. You opened that mouth. You came up with some ideas. You put forth a vision and some plans, and a lot of things happened, right? So, like, you were not yet publisher, right? We're talking about the early days. We're talking about 2002. This is when I owned a comic book store. Okay.
Yeah, this is 2003. I'm in that.
This is right in the middle of my tenure.
Yeah.
Of I bought the comic book store I grew up in. Okay.
Yeah.
In about 2001. And I had that thing till about 2009, 2010. So I was there for the Didio, like the beginning of the Didio era, so to speak. And I feel like your fingerprints were known, like were seen. Like you were making a difference even then. And I think the things that you're telling me about your relationship with Paul Levitz, his desire to have somebody to modernize both the workflow and maybe some of the approach, tells me that you had some sway there. So tell me, in that period, all right, you got your feet wet, you were writing, you're executive editor, okay? So now you are the executive in charge of editorial. So what does the executive in charge of editorial, what does Dan Didio do? What's your first Didio decree?
First Didio decree, I canceled Superboy.
The book you were on?
Yep, canceled my book.
Is that because you were bored of it?
No, I felt that it was off track and off message for what the character and story should be.
Well, we're going to circle back to Superboy for sure. I know a little bit later in this thing for sure. So I just explain to me who was writing it at the time when you canceled it. Were you still writing it? I don't have all those details.
Jimmy and I were both writing it. Yes, we were.
But you decided to end it because you just felt the direction was wrong.
I think ultimately because I wanted to refocus our energies. And it was interesting because it was a marginal seller at best. And one of the things I felt very strongly about was that we were supporting too many marginal selling books at DC, and we had to raise our line average in order to be more successful. So DC has always been very good at creating books that sell very well and very on the high end, and they're also very good at books that sell no copies at all. They really be able to cover the gamut. And success in comics doesn't come from getting those high boats. It really comes from a real strong middle of the line where we're able to build, build momentum on a number of titles on a consistent level. And the goal was to build better and consistent titles and not constantly work on the bar. And again, I'll have to go throw it back to Paul Levitz. But Paul gave me a great, you know how things, you just remember things. You remember things. We were talking about it, and I came in, you come in full of piss and vinegar. I'm going to make everything work. I'm going to fix every book. I'm going to make every book great. That's your choice. That's what you want to do. So you want to fix everything. That's the first motion. And Paul would say, okay, so you got a book that sells 10,000 copies, and you spend all this energy, and then you increase sales by 50%. Now you got a book that sells 15,000 copies. He goes, but if you take that same energy on a book that sells 30,000, there's a chance you can get up to 50. He goes, put your energy there. And that's the things that we looked at. And we focused our energy on the books that we knew we can make an appreciable difference and get a bigger win out of,
Sure. And so, but what was the philosophy on those lower selling books? Was there a numerical cutoff where if a book just sold less than X, no how we will publish it?
We did that in a couple of places. That wasn't the case. Is whether or not a book was achieving, if it had a purpose, if it was getting a message, it was trying to do something. We had 3 rules: book that sells, makes money, books that wins awards, books that make talent happy. Okay, and keep talent happy. Those are your 3 rules. If it doesn't fit any of those criteria, then the book is in question. So
that says a lot. And if you get 2 or 3 of those, then you got a mega hit on your hands.
Absolutely correct. You know, and in my early days, because I really didn't know what I'm doing, and because I wanted to try a lot of things, you see a lot of experimentation going on the line. I mean, crazy stuff. We had that werewolf book by Sam Keith, Scratch. We had Engine Head, Ted McKeever. We had, I'm trying to think what else Eye Candy, which was a lot of beautiful, a lot of beautiful different books. Didn't sell a lick, but boy, did it make the line look intriguing.
There were some really amazing creative choices made during that period. The one I'm drawing a blank on, the newspaper sized.
Wednesday Comics. The Wednesday Comics?
Yeah, Wednesday Comics. Yeah.
That was a brainchild of Mark Chiarello, who probably was one of the strongest editors, as well as an incredible artist in his own right in DC. I mean, he had a real good eye for character and story and just structure. As I always like to say, there's certain people in the comic industry, I call them classically trained. And what I mean by that is you had people that were trained by Denny O'Neil or Archie Goodwin or Julie Schwartz or some of these guys that really are the masters on how to construct and make comics. And you see people really pick up their skills. And unfortunately, some of that skills have been lost over time. But
okay, I want to ask you about that, Dan. So if you were executive editor, you must have been in charge to some degree of hiring new editors and right. So what are you looking for in an editor at DC Comics? What I've heard and what I've seen in the past is that the best editors, the ones that you just named, right? Some of those people that you just named, the Denny O'Neills, et cetera, were guys that had deep writing experience in comics, moved up through the ranks, took that job, and then were able to understand what the job entailed, both the writing and from the freelance perspective, and sort of make that work.
Right.
What's your philosophy on how do you bring an editor? How do you make an editor?
Okay. So we have to go back in time, first of all, and understand that during a period of time when you have all those great talents being editors, you have at DC, you have Ross Andrew, Joe Kubert, Dick Giordano. You have all these incredible guys who are seriously accomplished artists and writers in their own right, editing the books. Reason why is they made more money as an editor in those days when they were working in the business in that period of time. Editorial paid better, gave you benefits, steady work. Okay,
it's a full-time gig, right? As opposed to freelance work.
Then as you move forward, when royalties come in and the rates start going up, the money is better now as a writer or an artist. As a matter of fact, you see the reverse happening. You see people leaving editorial
because of royalties, which didn't used to exist back in those days.
I mean, one of DC's top writers is Pete Tomasi. Pete Tomasi, at the time when I started at DC, had the potential to be the best editor on the team. You know, and that's just the way it works. Because ultimately they see better fortunes moving out of that. And also you see, I mean, if you look at sports, you see how sports have changed, how people are much more people coaches than really, handling the tactics of the game. So a lot of folks are really good talent managers. They're good structural and be able to move product along, and they have some good story input. But because we move so fast, it's hard for everybody to really hone the craft, or even, I say, put a fingerprint on it. You know, in days,
really?
There's days you look back where you start to you can recognize a person's editorial touch because they were so strong about their point of view and vision.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, you probably don't see as much of that today. You know,
I thought that's a really interesting point I'd never thought of before, the dynamic changing due to royalties flipping that situation. So it would make it where in the past your editors were your strongest writers and were lured into that by the gravity of the money and the steady benefits and the game. And now that gravity and those orbits have been disrupted by the change, probably for the better, right? We want the talented writers to get royalties and produce good comics, but it must be difficult to get an editorial bench. So how did that manifest?
Well, then it becomes training of that. I mean, one of the things I used to do in my early years at DC in the executive editor spot is we used to map out a story for the year. And I used to basically write out a 20-page document, what we'd like to accomplish for the year, stories, acts, what books, things of that nature. I pushed that whole thing up to Paul. And Paul would basically, either yes or no, approve this, change that, do this, and then come back, and then we're off to the races. And what we had is a blueprint for the year, so a lot of people were working to the blueprint. And naturally, the problem is that became successful for us, and so the problem is you have to keep on trying to improve on your success, and that's when you start to get into a churn. You know what I mean? There's a point there. You love to say this was great. Okay, we're done, and sit back and enjoy it. But the truth be told is once you pull back, you got to go, what are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing next week? And
okay. Yes. And so let's get into it, Dan, because this was the period. We're still pre-publisher. We're still pre-Didio publisher.
Yes.
Talk to me about New 52. Talk to me about what happened there and then what went into Rebirth. Let's just talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, first of all, New 52 is publisher Dan, not executive editor Dan. So that's the first one.
But what year was that New 52? I'm trying to pull that back.
2011. So September 2011.
Great. It must have been right at my exit. I'm so confused on my timetable when I exited.
It all turns into, listen, I go online just to find out what day of the week it is these days.
Wait a minute. You know what? It was 52, the weekly series.
Now you're talking. Okay.
So take me to there because I feel like that's the influence. That's obviously the vector that led to New 52, right? That's why that's in my head. So tell me about that.
You know what? There's a story there, but I'll tell you why. Anyway, everything has a story if you haven't noticed already. That's what the business we're in. We're in the business of telling stories. Yeah, and weekly series 52. That came out of my love of animation and the idea of trying to do something nobody else had done before. I had liked what DC attempted to do with the Action Comics Weekly. They did a weekly comic.
That's the obvious parallel. Yes.
Yeah. So there was that, and then also, if you remember, Eclipse did bi-weekly comics for a period of time. New Wave, I want to say DNA. No, Airboy. It was Airboy and New Wave during the days, and so I always liked the speed. And I always said, can't we get product out at the same speed we're delivering product? That's what we should be doing if we're trying to be relevant and on top of things. So we were working to that story, and the original plan was that when we did the 1 year later jump, one was going to jump. We jumped forward a year in the storytelling, and the idea was to move everything into such a crazy place. We didn't know how we got there, and then 52, the weekly series, would fill in that gap. There was a lot of good intentions of that, but unfortunately, story-wise, it didn't work. So ultimately, the team, which was a very talented team of writers, were able to say, "Listen, we need to break free of that constraint and just tell our own story." To which, at that point, we're so vested in 52, the weekly series, I said, we got to make this thing work. So you guys got to go, and come hell or high water, we're gonna make this thing work. And
I'll be honest, it felt like a Lost, this TV series type scenario where it was sort of like, it felt like it was sort of being made up as it went along. And that's honestly, what else do you expect for a year-long weekly series with that kind of setup? Where do you feel like, if you could have gone back, you could have made one or two changes to that, and like, just in hindsight, playing that game for a second, there's changes you would have done that could have made it more what you wanted it to be, or did it go off the rails pretty quickly for you?
52 stayed on. 52 stayed on the rails, which was pretty amazing, giving so many different forces at it. Keith Didio always described it best. He used to say, the only reason why we're selling books is like going to NASCAR. They're waiting for a crash. And the crash never came with 52. As a matter of fact, it exceeded all our expectations. And then, unfortunately,
including mine, by the way, including mine. And let me just say that no matter what, that book put a lot of money in my pocket and in retailers' pockets and into the industry in general. Quality level, whatever, it was high quality. It was a varying quality because of what it was. A weekly series demands such a huge amount of talent, all coordinated together. So
there was an infamous moment for me in the middle of 52. We lost our editor of the book. He decided to move to Marvel in the middle of the book. And I called in his assistant and associate editor, right, at the time, who, if you know the rules of DC, an associate editor only is very limited in the amount of product he can do. Called him in, basically said, this book is yours. You will not fail. Every resource is yours to make it happen, but we will not miss a single day or shipping. You make that promise to me. And he promised me in that room he would. and we made it all the way through. We never did. But it was that moment of conviction. Like, this is not going to happen. Nothing's going to disturb it. And it was pretty amazing to see.
I kept waiting for it to crater myself. Honestly, I was looking at that final order cutoff because it was tricky. You had to get 4 issues in. So like if it started to collapse, I was worried, but it stayed pretty consistent to the end. Like
it's pretty amazing. I mean, there are so many heroes of that. The writers were heroes. The artists were heroes. Everybody was a hero in that thing. One of my young son, one of the great people in that was the cover artist, J.G. Jones, who did all 52 covers. And it's not turning in, as I like to call it. I see a lot of covers today. They feel like they're just basically commission art. The way it's just people just standing around or not doing anything special or unique about it. And for me, JG used to sit in the rooms with the writers and listen to what was being said and be part of the conversation and be part of everything taking place there. I found it fascinating because he actually was sketching in the room and he would draw things just from what people are talking about. And the writers would get inspired by what he drew and actually find ways to work what he was doing into the story. The infamous story of the Aborigine with the head of Red Tornado was something that JG sketched and found its way into the storytelling. So
I thought, I think that actually played a huge part of it. The consistency of the look and the package over that length of time really made it, if it had been more inconsistent, it would have been easier to drop the title, but it was coming out really, it was looking so great. Those covers were fantastic stuff. Jones is awesome. So let's keep moving though. So 52, you got through that. So let's move you up. Let's move to the publisher era. All right. Because this is where the fun really, this is where I have some of the tougher questions start to begin.
I had a lot of fun executive editor.
Commenters, there's a bunch of commenters that are like, when are the tough questions? Oh, nice softball. Guys, relax. We're having fun. We're talking about comics. Give me a break, man. What do you want me to do? I'm putting up those super chats, but believe me, we'll wait till the end. We'll have a Q&A. You can ask your questions to Dan, okay? Just relax. I am not looking at your comments too much, except for the super chats. Okay, so let's go into publisher. Let's talk about co-publishing with Jim Lee.
Yes.
So I don't know. Was there? I'm trying hard to think of another co-publishing thing. To me, when I look at what you told me about Dan Didio has a certain set of skills, okay, and Jim Lee has a certain set of skills, and in that Venn diagram, there's not a huge overlap in those skills, right? There's differences. You seem more like a. Well, then again, Jim Lee managed Wildstorm, and so he knew his share of production and production schedule. So you tell me, how did the duties break down? Were they by type of duty, or were they just split everything down the middle? Tell me how co-publishing how it worked.
It's a yin and yang. I mean, honestly, working with Jim was a pleasure. I can't describe it. I mean, he's a person who is so accomplished and so talented, and just his sheer insight into characters and stories and his visualization. It's also, we have different things. I'm much more into the nuts and bolts and getting down and rolling up my sleeves and getting into the trenches. And he has a much more overview on approach to things and seeing things very clearly. And He loved the digital aspect of it, the digital side, because he has always very fascinating about future thinking and future technologies and future thoughts. You know,
Dan, we can tell that.
He'll have a new iPhone before it comes out. That's what I always used to joke.
Yeah, we can tell that Jim Lee seems very interested in digital comics, and we'll talk a little bit about that soon. So let's keep going.
Yeah.
Tell me though about that. Tell me about that push and pull on digital and print, retailer pushback on the prices of digital. Tell me what was going on inside of DC with all of that. What was the thinking around digital pricing and first to market and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when we launched New 52, since we're now up to New 52, the relaunch of the line was one thing, but the one that got everybody's attention was the day and date digital, and it was the end of the world to a lot of folks. And I think that's what's so important that you got to remember is there's always this visceral first reaction of things, and you just got to take a half step back and not respond, and just give it a chance to think it through and settle to see what we thought. And we gave it a lot of thought, and we did not see anything that was saying that digital day and date was going to negatively impact the structure of how comics work.
I want to take for a second just to define what that meant. Digital day and date for you playing along at home means that digital comics came out literally the exact same day as the print comics, and actually maybe a little bit before, because you could get them at midnight or whatever, but same day, same date, just like other industries might drop things. I mean, I don't know. I'm actually not sure how it still works in the video world about physical versus digital dropping. Those things have seemed to have converged quite a bit. So what was the thinking there, and what was the result that came out of it?
Result is, we had a great level of growth naturally from day one. But after the first 2 years, it pretty much plateaued. And I have to say, quite honestly, digital sales plateaued and pretty much maintained consistent over the last 5 years. You got to forgive me, I don't have my charts in front of me anymore. But it was consistent for a number of years. And we even saw some degradation in digital sales, actually.
Can I make a hypothesis why that might be?
Excuse me?
If you don't mind? Can I offer a hypothesis on why that might be?
I think a lot of it had to do with pricing, I think, honestly. I think what we saw is every time you ran a sale, your sales would go up. But that would be one thing. So people were looking for that value for the digital purchase.
So you said the magic word, Dan. It's value, right? It's the digital comics stink. They stink. So you don't own them. You can't sell them. You can't trade them. You can't lend them to your friends. You can't do anything but maybe pinch them and screw them. You get a little bit of value out of it. So for me, there's a price problem there inherent in that. Whereas if the price were much lower, I might be tempted. But then there's all the equations of, well, if I cut the price in half, I got to more than double the sales. So were there experiments in that? Were the sales used to sort of try and find what the price point might be?
Well, I mean, we always felt there was a price point on it that's in the marketplace, and but we just didn't want to do anything that was going to over damage the physical sales if we thought we were going to go there, and the upside wasn't worth the risk on the other end. The bigger, I think the other thing too that you see some degradation of sales from is these subscription services. This you talked about not owning. This is the deepest understanding of not owning. It's that idea that it's just this sheer volume of product that they need to sell just to keep somebody reinvesting.
In other words, you mean like an all-you-can-eat Netflix type model? Right. As opposed to a piecemeal buy the digital copy. Maybe get a subscription. I get to read all my Marvel comics.
Right. And DC offered a subscription service through the DC Universe Online. Marvel had a subscription service, which was their own service. There's a Comixology one. There's a Kindle one. You know what I mean? So there's ones out there that everybody's participating to some level or other. But again, even with all those books, it still feels incomplete. And it's also, where do you focus? Where do you focus the people, and what are you really reading and not? And so there's a question of how successful that is or isn't. But like I said, but then again, if you look on the comic book side, we're doing our darndest just to limit ourselves just down to the the hardcore collectors. And every time you see a price increase or a format change or something like that, it narrows the audience down, which I think also is detrimental to comics overall too.
All right. Okay, Dan, I could see you sitting in a meeting talking about that. I see you sitting there and say, how do we get comics out to more people, right? These comic shops, they're limited. They're small. There's only so many. They can only grow so much, even if they want to grow. So, man, we better go for the mass market. And if we're going to go for the mass market, Dan Didio, we're going to go for the massest market of them all, and we're going to go for Walmart. So tell me.
Actually, that's not the massest market of them all.
Tell me what is.
Amazon.
Okay. True, but you're selling on Amazon already. Your products are there already.
Not periodicals.
Not well in Comixology they are, right? Which is owned by Amazon. So there's that. You got your Amazon's got their piece of everything, right?
Yeah. But nobody wants to go down there.
But you know, everybody thinks, by the way, online retailing is this gigantic thing, but brick and mortar retailer still is tremendously larger than online retail in almost every category. There's a misperception of that in the public, I think, but in comics for sure. One outlet, Walmart, could have more volume than the entire direct market, right? I know those conversations came up, Dan. I know you had those conversations. So talk to me about the Walmart conversations and how the 100-page with exclusive content, new stuff by Jim Lee, new characters that were never in the direct market before, debuting in Walmart 100-page giants. Tell me how that all happened.
Oh, were you in that meeting when they were yelling at me about Jenny Hex?
I'm sure I had that. I have Jenny Hex in my notes right here. Who cares about Jenny Hex? But whatever. But so that stuff happened. So wait a minute. So what retailers were saying and will say is, what reason would there be if it's just the Walmart people you're after? Why bother putting this collectible first appearance of anything in there? Because that's clearly a grab for direct market customers who care more about that stuff.
Comment? Yeah, sure. I mean, what was that? I have to be honest, not lie. What was the first line? What was the first thing?
Don't lie.
Don't lie. Okay, here you go. Jenny Hex in the Walmart book. Yeah, we didn't know it was there.
That makes the most sense of any explanation I've ever heard.
And honestly, if somebody came to me and said, Jenny Hex is going to be a character that's going to break out and that all the retailers are going to be upset that she appeared there first, I probably would have laughed pretty hard in my office.
That one always seemed to me like a little bit of a tempest in the teapot, Jenny Hex. But okay, let's put that aside. But let's talk about brand new content written by Brian Michael Bendis. You got Derringer, or I forget his name, Nick Derringer or whatever, doing the artwork on the Batmans. Beautiful looking comics. That was one of the best looking Batman comics I had seen for like a broad audience.
Producer comics for me, man. He's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, how does life work? You want to go out best foot forward. You know what? If you go out with leftover material, bad material, or something else, and you go, well, I can't believe this didn't work. Well, you put no effort into it. So basically I said, if we're going to do it, and we're going to try to carve new territories, we're going to put our best foot forward. So who's our best talent? What can we do? How does this work? And it worked really well for Brian, because Brian at the time when he first joined DC was much more interested in working on Superman and felt that it was too obvious to be working on Batman. But this is a way for us to get a Batman story with Brian Bendis, and a great one at that. So that was what's fun about it, and it existed off to the side, so it allowed him a lot of freedom in the storytelling. Because ultimately, the last thing you want to do in Walmart is open up with issue 17 of a 47-part crossover and think that it's going to casually pick something up. So
I get that. And your contention though is that it wasn't about Brian Michael Bendis being a name that would attract somebody in Walmart. It was more just about Brian writes great comics and
yes,
right,
100% right. That's exactly what it was.
So was there an editorial mission though? Like they were sent on to say write stories for at this, because it was clear those were written as sort of a, you know, they weren't written at like an animated series level, but they weren't written at the sort of more adult oriented Batman stuff that we've certainly seen lately at a Black Label or whatever. It seemed like, to be honest, that Batman book, when I read it, when it finally did come out in the direct market for $4.99, I believe, I read it and I said, I wish this is what the regular Batman series was like, just for a mass audience. Like I like Tom King, and I was really into the Tom King, up and down on it, whatever. But I liked it as an adult reader of Batman or whatever. But I felt like if a kid comes off the street and grab Batman, this is what they want. They want something a little more, I don't know. Tell me your thoughts on that, on how we get that tween generation back to comics, because it seems like we've got the young kids again and we've got the older people, but now it's that video game tween generation.
I mean, listen, the Walmart Giants were very specifically created to attract a casual fan. The ideas in the books, each book was built off of something that had some mainstream interest and knowledge that a casual fan might pick up because they seen a movie or a TV show. Or a video game or something like that. That was the thought behind it. Then the goal was to make a story that was extraordinarily accessible. You didn't need to know the baggage. If I could convince people that the comics don't have baggage and that they should come in and enjoy themselves, then that's the way to work. I mean, one of my first comics that I read when I was really young, hey, it's the 80-page Giants in the 60s. You know, World's Finest with the Superman and Batman stories. You know, none of those stories made any sense, but boy, were they a lot of fun to go through in that. So we try to capture some of that energy in a way that we can produce it affordably, but also get something new that's exciting for them.
Okay, I read somewhere young Dan Didio's salad years of comics were 70 to 72.
Possibly.
And so that was really interesting though, because I looked back, I did some reading and said, what happened in comics around those times? What happened to DC Comics around that time? Man, Jack Kirby making the transition right over to DC. Such a parallel in my mind when Bendis made the move from Marvel to DC. What can you tell me about how that happened and how that came about, and what role you played, if any, or how that worked?
Yeah, Brian and I had several meetings. I knew his contract was coming to an end. We had danced around it years before and never was able to pull it off. But this seemed like it was much more real this time. And we sat down, and I forgot, we met in a coffee shop somewhere. In Santa Monica, I think it was Santa Monica, and we sat down and just talked comics for about 2 hours. And I didn't know Brian well, to be honest with you, because he was so Marvel, and I just honestly, I don't interact that much. I just really focus on what I'm working on. So I got a chance to know him. He got a chance to know me. We know the same circles. So it was a lot of fun to get to know him, and honestly, he's such a giant in the business. I actually feel he's one of the people that helped reinvent comics a little bit. You talk about those years.
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about his coming to Marvel.
Yeah,
one of several key creators, and it was more of a writer-led revolution at that time, right? That's why I found it interesting, because instead of like Kirby coming over as, he was a writer too, but primarily known as an artist. Yeah. And the industry shifted to be more writer focused and writer oriented. It seems in many ways. And then, so Bendis coming over, he had done a lot at Marvel, mega hits, as well as less than hits in some of the later years. There were some misses there. Came into DC, like you said, Batman was obvious. Too obvious, right? That's like, of course, that's what Brian, we're going to get a dirty crime Michael Bendis story. No, He wanted Superman. And he wanted not just Superman, he wanted to shake things up with Superman. He wanted to make some big changes to the status quo, to which iteration of Superboy are we talking about now? How many, Dan, how many young kids Superman characters does DC need? They have not gotten less. Every year they get another new one and another one and another. So Bendis obviously had some plans and some thoughts on how to put the man into Superman, I think. Treat him like more like a man. That seems what he's doing there. Tell me about about that and maybe how he pitched it? And
Yeah, no, he pitches the whole story. He wanted to play with the origin a little bit. He really wanted to come back in and really position him. I mean, what one of the things that Brian told me early on about Superman for him is that he's a young Jewish kid from Cleveland. So he really related to Siegel and Schuster and their story. And he feels an affinity to the character because of that. And it was very personal. You could tell it was very personal to him about what he felt on. And it was interesting because he came in a lot more aggressive on things that he wanted to do. But then once he understood the mantle of Superman, it became much more. I think he came at it much more traditionally than I actually expected, because I think he realized what it stood for, the character stood for. And once he started writing it, he really started to embrace Superman in the world and the relationships of who all they are. And he really made it his own at that. And listen, you know, we had some wonderful stuff going on with Tomasi and Jurgens right before that. So, you know, it wasn't that it was broken before he came in. So, you know, he came in and really applied his class, so to speak.
Here's the thing, dude. Here's the thing that I hear from I see on the internet a lot of people complaining about the Super Sons, and they love the Clark Kent relationship. It was so wonderful. And isn't it great to see Clark as a father and his son growing up? And but is that not the most boring thing that you've ever heard of? We need some drama. We need some excitement. Nobody wants. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I don't want to read that. So
no. Trust me. Hey, listen. I understand that more with Superman than Batman. Let me put it this way. You know what I mean? I think
fair enough.
I probably had a more difficult time with the Damian Batman relationship as it started to soften up than I did with Superman and young Jonathan. The irony is, as the story goes, I was a. You shouldn't say these things. I was a big Super Sons fan in the 70s when they used to run in World's Finest. Paul was not a big fan of Super Sons, as we used to go back and forth. So I got to do my Super Sons story. That's all I know.
Okay, I'm gonna close it on Bendis for a second. He's a personal favorite of mine. He's got a lot of heat. Would you say has his sales reception been what DC hoped it would be? Just keep it real, man.
It's hard to say that because it's hard to do a one-for-one comparison. The business is constantly changing. Do you know what I mean? And
it's hard to say monthly sales of the comic don't tell the whole tale. That's for sure.
Yeah,
right?
and unfortunately, the business is so reliant on variant covers, so reliant on stunting, so reliant on events, so reliant on change or faux change, that when you have a solid story which just delves into the sensibilities of the character and the depth of the character, sometimes that's going unnoticed right now. And that's heart-wrenching to me, because that's the stuff that pulled me into it. I wanted that melodramatic soap opera mixed with action adventure on a monthly basis. I didn't need dozens of guest stars every book. I like the things, and I used to joke with the staff. Maybe they don't think it's a joke, probably. One of the things I always hated was a line. I call it the lineup. When every hero shows up at an event and they're all standing there side by side, shoulder to shoulder, staring and listening to somebody, and I'm like, how does each of these characters lose all their individuality when you put them in that big vanity shot?
Right.
You know, why is Harley Quinn standing next to Batman, next to, Robin, and that's perfectly okay. You're not even looking at the team dynamics anymore. And this goes back to my co-publisher, Jim Lee, who explained it to me so clearly. And when he was drawing X-Men, whenever he drew X-Men, every X-Men was doing something different. One's smoking, one's drinking, one's sitting, one's talking, one's pacing, one's looking the other way. Everybody's doing something different, because each movement was based on their individual personalities. But when you do these vanity shots with 500 characters all standing shoulder to shoulder, homogenous, and they're all hands on hips or smiling, as I like to say, they lose any sense of personality, any sense of uniqueness. And once we started homogenizing them, you stopped losing your ability to tell individual stories and individual books with these characters, because everything was built on the mass appeal. You know, the mass approach. Everybody travels in a group. You know, we're all going to go to this event together. Okay. Oh, we're all going to go to this event together. And every time you turn around, everybody's showing up everywhere. It's because we just lost what the books were about.
Okay. And I'm going to get here. This is probably one of maybe the toughest lines of questioning you're in for tonight. All right. One of them. We still got a few coming up. Sure. All right. So when I reached out and I said to people, what do you want me to ask Dan Didio about? Right. What are the things that we want to know? A lot of it, several things were about editorial decisions, about project pitches that were put out there and maybe didn't come to pass and maybe were given to other teams or whatever, right? Okay, so I got 3 here.
Good for it.
Okay. I got Darwin Cook wanted to do a last Wally West story, but wanted it to have nothing to do with any kind of big crossover thing. And it was, and this is rumor mill stuff, but from a pretty decent source in this case. I'm not going to reveal my source, but I have this pretty close to the source.
Okay.
And that the idea was, no, we want to have Wally West in whatever that Tom King Infinite or that Identity Crisis. No, the other crisis, the crappy crisis. Anyway, the one that just came out.
Yeah.
And so they wanted that instead. And it was more editorial driven and it was more a whole universe thing. Any comment on that particular one? Any memory?
I don't remember that story. I don't remember. There's a lot of stuff that Darwin and I agreed on and disagreed on over the years. You know, like as I like to say, I found New Frontier in the Arch Rose of Mark Chiarello, and as that story goes. Mark was sitting on New Frontier because they had to put it on hold because ultimately they stopped working on it because they couldn't make it work with continuity at DC at the time. So they stopped working on it and Darwin stopped addressing it. And I looked at the book and I saw how beautiful it was. I said, we'll just put it out as its own thing. And that was that, you know, and that was there. And, you know, Darwin and I on and off, you know, agreed and disagreed. We had a running gag. Every time I saw him, I go, are we mad at each other? I forgot where we left off.
Okay, I got 2 more for you. Well, that one was out of the shape.
The Wally West story, don't remember that. I don't remember him ever really being overly anxious to do a Wally West, to be honest with you.
Okay, these next 2 I'm thinking might ring more of a bell. Okay. So there was a pitch by Grant Morrison and J.H. Williams for All-Star Superman 2. What happened?
Not that I know of. There's never a pitch for that for me. That's a new one for me. According to you, I talked to Grant. That story was done. I never got a second pitch. Sorry, that's news to me too. 2 for 2.
Okay, fair enough. Last one. I don't have any more info on it than that. Last one. This one comes straight from the source of a creator who said, Evan Dorkin said he had a killer Metal Men pitch with Mike Allred, who is fantastic. I can't imagine a better person to draw Metal Men, frankly. There's a lot of great artists out there.
Oh, yeah. That one.
Yeah, but then you ended up writing the Metal Men series. I know it's a favorite group of characters, as you talked about. So tell me, how does that happen?
Well, I wrote it 15, 16 years later, so I wouldn't associate the 2 same things together. But at the time, it was pitched. Part of what I was trying to accomplish in the DC universe was trying to move the universe forward. So much of a lot of the material was so built on the Silver Age images and concepts, and that had a very Silver Age thought and feel. And I didn't want to do a retro style book at that moment in time. We really are trying to move the universe forward, and the goal was to really be proactive and forward thinking. It's a lot of things. Look, I understand it. There's a lot of things that come across, and people have a real love for these things, and I understand that. And I knew that was frustrating for both of those guys. But at that moment, we had a mission, which was that we don't want to be referential to the past. We want to be craving a new future, and the reason why we went that way.
Fair enough. I saw an interview with you, I think at a previous San Diego Comic-Con, where you talked about the problem with nostalgia driving the current culture in comics. Talk about that for a second, if you would.
Why
is that a big problem?
You know what? Here's the thing. First of all, everything stays in print now. So if you really want nostalgic books or things that look back, you can actually go out and purchase those original versions and go back and see what the source material is. And a lot of things are just people's interpretations of what they remember it to be. And as I used to say, it becomes a copy of a copy. And ultimately, we have to be carving new territories, and we have to be moving our business forward. The only way you're going to attract new people, the new readers, new voices, is to create books and material that play to the current sensibilities and understanding, more so than just constantly rehashing the past.
Okay, Dan, it's like you're teeing me up, baby. So let's talk G5.
Gee, what's that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, you tell me, baby. What is it? I don't know either, because is it coming? Is it not? What was the plan? What's happening? What can you tell us?
It was a concept and idea pitch that either will or won't reach fruition. Beats me. It was something that I was pushing forward. I had a number of meetings with editorial over an extended period of time. Actually presented it to some of the retailer base also, to see what their interest and input is. A lot of times when I have a huge initiative or try to do a new huge initiative, I try to get as much consensus as possible. And so we used to run that past a lot of people for stress testing it. I had a lot of very strong, good, strong vocal retailers that would tell us what was right, what was wrong, identify the landmines. So we were in the stages where we were moving it down the road. And then ultimately, everything for me came to an end. So where that moves forward is in the hands of the people that are making the decisions, you know.
Because I'll be honest, it reminded a lot of people of something that happened in Marvel a while back, Marvel Now, where they kind of did relaunched, renew versions of characters, and that didn't go over very well. That project didn't go over well. You say that and I believe you when you say you're not reading the competition stuff. You got a lot of work. You're focused on the comics that you're doing. So I'm not saying that you were necessarily influenced by that, but there was a sentiment against that about, we don't want the next generation. I don't want Batman Jr. I want Batman. Right?
And I'll tell you right now, it wasn't that. It wasn't even close to that.
Okay.
It was something.
Right, well,
if I could, the only thing I'll say is that it was a long-term plan featuring a lot of the key recognizable characters and a long-term evolution over years that had been thought out. So that's where it is.
Fair enough. All right, Dan. So I got a couple. We got one more. This comes from Reagan Clem, by the way, who introduced us.
Yes, exactly.
All of the very nicest, especially the early questions, those came from Reagan. A lot of those came. He's the nicest guy I know. One of the nicest guys.
I can't wait till he gets his own show.
So, Dan, give us your. Okay, we know you left DC. We're not going to go into the details of that in like specifics. It's okay, but tell us when you were there. Your favorite achievements, biggest disappointments.
Oh gosh, you know what's fun about this? I played this game with some other folks, and the good part is I change them every time.
It was a new one, then. That's exclusive content.
Yeah,
I like that.
Because you know what? Because what it does, you start to think about it, and you know it's 18 years, man. So you don't remember it all at one time. You know, so you go, oh, I should have thought of that. Oh, I should have said that. My favorite achievements, you know, it's still for me. There's a period of time. From Countdown to Infinite Crisis, all the way through to the end of 52, which is probably my sweet spot. But you know what? I'm going to go back. Couple of things before that. You know, like I said, you know, I always thank Jim for Hush, because when Hush came out, it protected me. Everybody was looking at Hush, and we were making all these mistakes. And then we're figuring it out. But the first big book where I felt that I got a chance to put fingerprints on was Graduation Day, which was a 2-3-part series that Judd Winnick did that basically brought the Titans book to a close and the Young Justice book to a close, and it ended those series. And then we launched right behind it with the new Teen Titans book that Jeff Johns did, and The Outsiders that Judd did. So that moment in time, because ultimately that was my put up or shut up moment. Ultimately, that was where everybody said this isn't going to work. We've done this already. We've relaunched the Titans. You give the Titans a rest. Give these books a rest. Leave them on the shelf. And I remember Jeff going, no, they just weren't done right. We know how to do it. We're going to get it done right. We're going to put it out there. So Judd does this crazy story, and we kill Donna Troy at the end. And that, you know, it was our first, you know, big death. And I remember Paul not enjoying how we ended it, but we said we did it on a reason. We did it for a purpose. And he goes, well, you know, this better, you know, everybody's like this. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, this better work, man, because I'm kind of in hot water already. And then that Titans book comes out. Jeff's Titans book comes out. And it sells out. And we do a second printing, sells out. We do a third printing, sells out. We do a fourth printing, sells out. And all of a sudden, we got bigger numbers on this Teen Titans book than we did if we added the year of Teen Titans prior to that together. And I'm looking like, holy shit, this worked. And then Outsiders comes out. And boy, I felt, you know, when those two hit right behind it, it got the mojo going. You know, it's all of a sudden now everybody starts to get a little step, you know, get a little bounce in your step, a little more big walk going. So I got to go back. So for you, my big favorite is is Graduation Day, because that's the one that kicks it off.
Okay.
And then I'll give you my new disappointment. This is my disappointment. Yeah. Is it okay? Because I was just looking at it before I got on here. Okay. So when I got to DC, I went through a lot of these guys' files, old pitches, old ideas, and things of that nature that guys just had in the drawers over the years that didn't work or started or half done, just to see if there was any rock we could turn over, because you're always scrambling for things and where it might be a good idea. And I found a pitch, and I forgot the original title of the series, but it was from George R.R. Martin, and it was about basically setting up the world, a world that would be equivalent to Australia, with all the villains being shipped to that world and their lives on this alternate world. And I said, "Wow, that's so powerful." Was it one
of the wild cards?
No, it wasn't. It was actually what ultimately becomes Salvation Run, the Salvation Run miniseries for DC. Okay. So I'm like, this is wonderful. Why didn't you do it? Well, it's dark, it's edgy, and I'm like thinking, come on, we can be dark and edgy. Sure, let's go. And ultimately, so we get to George, and we get him and his writing partner turn into script, and I get that first script, and let me tell you. I know where the mind that puts the Red Wedding together in Game of Thrones comes from, because we had a similar scene with the DC characters, and I went, holy hell, we can't do this. But I still love the idea. And the reality is I probably should have just let it die at that moment, but we pushed it and never really achieved the level, because George had a very clear vision, very clear idea, and it had to be so dark and gritty. And we couldn't go there. So by watering it down, it became neither fish nor fowl. And that's a mistake. Sometimes you got to let things run its national course. And sometimes if you force them too much, they might not be as valuable at the end of the day, you know? So. Okay.
Dan, you've talked about a lot here. Yeah. I've still got quite a bit here. Well, but we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to try and make it a little bit fun.
Want to ask me some questions?
No, we're going to play a game. We're going to play a game that we play here on the show. We played it once before. Okay. We've got an all-new version. We like to call it comic book hero or villain. Okay. And as an extra special bonus. Now, in the past, I've done this as a slideshow, and I show some people, and I ask for your comments and your take on them, right? And you could say, I'm going to give you could say they're a hero to the industry, they're a villain, or maybe you could say like they're a Magneto. Maybe they're like in between. I don't, you know what you could just give, or you could pass. You could be a spoil sport pass and not do anything.
I'm going to try. Here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try not to be a spoil sport, but what I will do is contextualize whatever we put in front of us. How does that sound?
I would expect nothing less, Dan Didio. So let's go, man. Spin the wheel. Let's spin the wheel of comic book heroes and villains here on Comic Book News. Oh my gosh, we're starting out with Bammo, David Gabriel. Do you know that name?
Sure do.
Okay, what do you think of Dave?
Yeah, no, I know Dave. You know, I mean, might have spoke to him once or twice in my life. You You know,
David Didio is the vice president of sales at Marvel Comics. In case anybody doesn't know, I believe that's his title. I might have that wrong.
Yeah, he is what I call a worthy adversary. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
He has he knows how to work the market, play to the market, manipulate the market. He has all the strengths necessary you need from a person in the sales department. So as I would go, you know, as a person who was battling against what he had done and trying to figure out how to one up them. They always figured out how to one up us. So I have to give him credits on that.
Right.
And definitely a worthy adversary.
Okay. You know, in my business, in the computer game that I'm in, it's like there's sort of a backhanded insult you can give somebody. You can say, oh, he's a great salesperson. He's a true sales guy. So, all right, David Gabriel is a sales guy. All right, let's go. As these names come up, they're going to disappear. Oh, my gosh, this is a controversial one for sure, Dan. You know why. You know who this is. You know Eddie Berganza got booted from DC after a long period of accusations and stuff going on. He was kept in the industry even though he was kind of acting creepy, allegedly. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take a pass on this one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Ooh, Grant Morrison. We know who that is. Tell me your thoughts,
Grant Morrison,
man.
Okay, since I can play. Grant's one of my heroes. I absolutely adore Grant. I mean, gosh, the hours that I've spent with him, working with him, listening to him, knowledge. He's one of the smartest people in comics. One of the people who truly loves comics, understands comics, deconstructs comics, reconstructs comics, has his own take, his own wonderful take. He's one of the hardest people for other writers to follow because what he does is so unique that only he can do and find the right voice for what he goes on. But he's one of the guys I actually consider a friend in the business. I
mean, there's no doubt he's one of the all-time great writers of comics. I felt like All-Star Superman is a high water mark for the character in many ways. But I wondered, you know, what did you think ultimately of the approach that was tried on the New 52 Superman? That was really Grant Morrison's kind of baby there, right? Yeah,
no, we pushed him hard, and that was him. I mean, in all honesty, we should have tried to find a way to make the Superman book and the action book align better. So that way we would have been better
organized. That was
organized.
a big mess up, Dan. Let's say it like it is, man. George Perez on one book, and it's a diametrically opposed kind of books in the same time.
Yeah, it was. You know what? There's an old expression: "Look good on paper." Look good on paper on the lineup. But you know, these guys are so unique in their own creative abilities. Grant's. You know, it's interesting because when you talk to Grant about it, I had a chance to work with Grant on an issue of Sideways. He came in and co-wrote an issue of Sideways with me where we brought back the New 52 Superman. And I wanted him to write that character one more time because I kind of like the arrogance and strength of that character, the cockiness, the idea that I'd be able to get this stuff done because, hell, I'm Superman. There was something fun and fresh about it. And honestly, when we were going for New 52, we needed things that felt different and fresh and new. And we had to break free of some of the models, and he was very strong about doing that and had a very strong interpretation, and I thought he brought it to the paper really nicely.
I thought it was innovative for sure, like and harkening back to the early roots of the character, yet still trying to keep it fresh. What was really confusing to me about the New 52 was like, okay, we got this all new Superman, but it's same old Batman and same old Green Lantern. And to me, that did something to that relaunch, if you will.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Like I said, we can all play Monday morning quarterbacks. Every decision you make makes sense unto themselves at a moment in time. But the reality is that when you look at the aggregate, you don't see the damage it does until later in the game. And the problem with New 52 in particular was that it broke so big and was so strong at the start that you didn't see those cracks that were there early in the beginning until it was too late and the cracks became fissions. And then ultimately you had a harder time to fix them. You know,
I thought early on I really loved the Wonder Woman, the Azarella
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, and I thought the action stuff was good. Okay, let's move on. Grant Morrison, he's a hero. What do we expect? Of course he's a hero. Come on.
one of the good people in business too. One of the real good people.
Oh, okay. What about this guy? Do you know who this is? And what are your thoughts here on comics journalism and Rich Johnston?
You know, that's an interesting question.
Put on your diplomatic face, Dan, because you're putting on your diplomatic face, and that's cool. But you know,
well,
Rich,
your list of things said nothing about not being diplomatic.
True.
Here's the thing.
You're being nice.
What?
You're being nice. That's true.
That's you know what? We should all be nice. That's what my belief is, by the way.
Fair enough. You want to pass on this one, or you got to Rich?
Yeah. No, I think you know what? Rich serves a purpose in the industry. I hate to say that. You know, I mean, I could be honest. I was at points of complete aggravation and anger with him. But the reality, if he wasn't doing it, somebody else would. That's just how this stuff works. If you look at every industry and every business, there's always somebody in there attacking at certain levels or pulling the information out or trying to supersede any announcements to be in there. So the question is, where I have a problem is when it's personal. Never cared about stories. I mean, of course I did. I cared about stories leaking, but you know, you could talk to every retailer, and every retailer said, and every retailer to this day still says, I've never lost a sales because of a leaked story. Right. I hear that all the time. You know, they want the information out there. They want to feed the information.
Well, I thought that kind of stuff is one thing. Some of the personal stuff that he put out there, I felt was a little.
That's my problem. You know, but you know, my goal was always to not engage, because I don't want to be part of the story. It's my job was to make comics that are entertaining, not to police the industry. You know. Okay,
let's go. Let's get into this. Let's go lightning round here for a second. We'll go through these, and then I want to end off. We have to talk about the current DC shakeup with Diamond Distribution and stuff like that. Okay, we're gonna talk about that, people. That's gonna be our final topic here. We're gonna go lightning round, hero or villain. You can just give me a hero or villain, or if you have a particular or a pass, and if you have a particular comment that you want, we pause and we'll talk about it. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I know the answer on this one, I think.
Yeah. He's I think he's one of the good people and decent people in the business too. And one of the I think if you go down, he'll be listed as one of the all-time great talents in comics too.
I no doubt about it. Oh.
He's I mean, honestly, he's the guy. He is the standard bearer of comics at this moment in time. He's the top of the line.
All right. And he's your pal too.
Yeah, but that's not the reason why. He's Jim Lee.
Okay.
I'll be honest.
Okay. This is a name that's not going to be too familiar to a lot of people.
She's one of the new movers and shakers, and I wish her all the best. If anybody's up to the task, it's Nancy.
Okay, we'll talk about some of those moves in a minute. You know, similar kind of name that not many people might know, but what's your feeling?
Diane's a good friend as well. I mean, Diane was my boss. She gave me an opportunity of a lifetime. I'll be honest with you. In my own mind, I don't think I'd ever be qualified to be the jobs that I've had in my life. You know how you ever think about yourself sometimes? You're like, how do you ever get to these spaces? Diane had belief and faith in me, and gave me. Look, I got to be published for DC Comics. End the story. You know what I'm saying?
Imposter syndrome. I think everybody feels it to some degree, man. And I feel you go like, who is putting their faith in this guy to do that? Right?
You sure? You know, I have a great little story about Diane. Is that I thought she was going to fire me when I first met her. So I just went at it. I'm like, this is what you need to do, and this is what you got to do. And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, they're offering me the position. I'm like, what?
She likes the truth, man. Tell the truth, right? All right, let's keep going. Okay, what do you think of Steve Jeppy?
Steve Jeppy is a you know what? I mean, you know, some people transcend, okay, the business. Steve Jeppy transcends the business, just like Jim does, you know. But Steve is a force of nature in the business. He saw an opportunity and took it with the distribution from Diamond. He took it all on. Listen, you're not going to agree with everybody's business practices. Nobody agrees. No, you can't do that anywhere. But there's no denying. The respect I always have is for people who have the love and excitement of the business and have the industry's interest at heart. Steve Jeffy loves comics. He wants to see comics succeed and stay around for a long time. So how can you not support him in that sense?
Hero, right? I mean, dude, he's a friend of this show and he's a good guy. And I want to take a pause for a second on Steve Jeffy because there's so much stuff going on out there about Jeffy and the industry and Diamond as a company as a whole. But man, I used Diamond for 10 years as a retailer and many years before that. And honestly, they did a really tough job. They did a really good job at something that's really not easy to do. And I'm always going to give them credit for that. But wait till you see the comments calling me a shill and everything else.
That's easy to say, but when you see, when you look at the direct market, how long it has lasted and how it has thrived in certain periods of time and its ebbs and flows, the reality is Diamond's at the core of that. And you have to be true to understanding that there was a level of care, interest, love, push, pull, fighting, necessary choices to be made in order for this thing to succeed. I've heard a lot of the backstories about those early days. I love talking about that stuff. I'm a big comic book history buff. I love the history of comics because ultimately I believe that this business is cyclical and it comes around and around and comes back again. Grant always tells me that story about how the ebb and flow of creativity comes around. And I feel that the same thing too. And we're always at that juncture where there's a level of reinvention that needs to take place. But there also needs to be a certain level of stability because you need a foundation or base to work from. If you don't have a strong base, then you can't work from anything else. If you have a weak foundation, whatever you build on top of it can tumble down. So the Diamond has provided that strong foundation for a very long time for this business, and it's easy to walk on it, but you should not ignore what its purpose was and how it kept the business going.
Dan. A good point. And I'm going to take a break for a second here and just say, hey, man. If you want to be a guest or have your comics reviewed on Comic Book News, just send an email to cbn@danshaheen.com and send me some comics. You can mail them to me and I'll read them or I'll show them on the show. It's going to be fantastic. You'll love it. All right. Well, let's get back to the game. We've only got a couple more names.
Wow. I didn't know I was going to do all the names. I thought this was a spinning wheel. This really wasn't a spinning wheel. This was the line. What the heck?
They disappear one at a time. It's great. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you know what? I worked a lot with Ethan in the past, so I'm going to have to take a pass.
Too close to make a call, huh? Okay, Dan.
No, I know a lot. You know what? Hey, listen, if it's not about the comics, I don't want to get into it. To be honest with you, everything that goes around it. My focus, my interest has always been about how do we tell stories? What are the best stories? What are the things we challenge ourselves in comics and stories? That's all. That's what I care the most about. And my fear is always that we're losing that message. And it's part of our own fault. We have to make better stories that are intriguing and exciting that people want to get excited about. You talk about the days when we led into Infinite Crisis, when Jeff is on Teen Titans and all these other things going on. People are talking to me about every day. What's the comic? What's going on? I want to know what's happening. The conversations were there. Conversation has gotten away from comics. It's gotten away from story. It's gotten away from everything that makes the community interesting.
You're right, Dan. That's our mission here at Comic Book News is to bring it back. It's about the comics, the stories.
It's all about the comics, man. It's all about the comic story. That's all I care about. When I see people, we talk about comics. I don't worry about everything else. I can't.
You start watching the channel then more, Dan. I feel like we got some stuff going on for you here. So let's finish up.
Actually, you know the truth. One of my friends said that to me, so I do want to see more. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Cool. All right, last two names are Marvel names, I think. Dan Buckley.
Dan Buckley is, he's the rock of Marvel Comics. He's the unsung hero. He is the man that's consistent all the way through, making it happen. And honestly, I met Dan once. Like I said, I don't mix it up much, the Marvel guys much, but we all know each other respectfully from a distance. And I found him to be an extraordinarily respectful person and a good person too. So, Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm one of those guys that if people are problems, I try to keep them out of my life, not in them.
I'm with you,
I
man.
throw them out. You know what? I have absolutely no opinion of Mike because I've never met him, so I don't know what to say. Again,
I don't know a thing about the guy, really.
No, I mean honestly, and you know what? Probably better off for it too. The end of the day, again, you know, my guys are, you know, when I sit there, what I know about Marvel was as I used to joke, I said I used to read Marvel comics, and they used to just annoy me. They annoy me if they sell better. They annoy me if they're told better, and they annoy me if they have talent that I want to be working with. So they just annoy me.
All right, Dan. So, man, you've been a really great sport. I mean, look, people are going to beat you up about you didn't say mean things about whatever on that list, but come on, people. This is a professional here. This is a guy who's worked with all these people and maybe needs to work with them in the future, but also genuinely does not have the kind of, I don't know, perverse, sick hatred that I see out there for some people in the industry. Like, I just see, you don't seem like you take it that personally.
It's first of all, it's not personal. You got to understand that, okay? The fact that I'm even being interviewed after leaving the job surprises me because,
exactly.
You know, as I always said, I'm a renter. I was a renter at DC, you know, and you know, if everybody came in and undid everything that I worked on the day after I left, that's cool. That's their choice. It's not my job anymore. That's just the way it is. But I had a lot of fun, man. I was there for 18 years. Had a lot of fun doing what I was doing. And I really enjoyed that job. And the things that I used to love with DC Nations and getting out there at the conventions and putting on the panels and really mixing it up about anything. Just getting people worked up about, and it's always about character and story. And you know, somebody was talking to me about Wally West and Dick Grayson. That, you know what, I didn't really have it against them, but it became such a great cannon fodder for conversation and storytelling that you sort of just fed into it. I never forgot that. As the story goes, I was at one of the shows, and this is where the Dick Grayson things come from. And we really were going to kill Dick Grayson. I was hell-bent to kill him at the end of Infinite Crisis. It made so much sense. It was the perfect story beat. It's the perfect way. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman not talking to each other. The only thing bringing back with the greatest death possible, the most heart-wrenching one. Dick Grayson was the one over here. So anyway, we don't do it. So I'm in a convention. I'm recanting that story. And every time I said, and Dick Grayson dies, there's this woman in the third row, wonderful woman, third row. And I say it, and she screams, no! And she throws her arms up, no! And I was shocked that somebody had such a visceral reaction to me just even alluding to the fact that Dick Grayson was going to die. Well, for the rest of the panel, I kept on saying Dick Grayson dies, and she would scream, on cue, everyone. And we knew we had a shtick. Then we turned it into Wally West, and then, you know, it sort of went on from there.
All right. Well, Dan, I want to go into the current crisis that's happening here. I want to wrap it up here with just your thoughts on this. You don't have any skin in this game necessarily anymore. Although, do you want to talk about what you're moving on to or any plans, or you want to talk about that stuff at all?
Actually, not yet. I mean, the reality is I've got a lot of little things, a lot of little irons in the fire. To be perfectly honest, I took a moment and I realized that I've been working nonstop since I was 16 years old. I'd never been unemployed.
I hear you.
And, you know what? It's kind of weird. I'm kind of, you know what? I figured what I wanted to do is I wanted to just take some time down and spend the time at home. Little did I know I'd be locked in the house for 3 months.
I know. Well, talk about, like I said in the intro, man, the timing, your exit timing. How much better could it have been? Unless you were somehow planning the COVID-19 outbreak, like I don't see how you could have timed it any better.
Well, keep that hero or villain up. That might could describe me better now, right?
Oh, yeah. That reminds me. Let me get rid of that thing. Hang on a second.
You know what? But honestly,
Let's talk about DC. Let's talk about DC though, and the current break from Diamond Comics. Okay, I just want to set it up for a second, right? So, COVID hits. DC announces, look, Diamond has stopped shipping, so that gives us a chance to break our deal with them. We have an exclusive contract for 2 decades with Diamond Comics. So we think that it's better. We want to get our books to the people that want it even though Diamond has announced it's going to come in a couple weeks, we're going to rush. We're going to have 2 other retailers, turn them into distributors, and to get books out 1 week earlier, right? This stunk to a lot of people for a lot of reasons, right? Because one, it was kept secret that these 2 new distributors were actually 2 of the biggest direct market retail mail order firms, right? Midtown Comics and DCBS. Now so now it was announced, yeah, you could get an account with either of these guys regionally, but you can keep your account with Diamond too, right? We still got terms. We've got a month-to-month contract with going with Diamond, so we'll keep going. Then something happened. Okay. Yeah. We don't know exactly what happened. There was some negotiations back and forth, and DC said, okay, thanks. Nice being with you. Bye-bye. We're done with Diamond. We're going exclusively, and we're doing it now. We're not waiting until the orders you have in place are filled. You got 3 months worth. No, we're cutting it off now. We're going to cancel those things. We're going to force you, if you want DC Comics, to get an account with your biggest mail order competitors, and if you view them that way. And this is the new reality. So now, instead of more distribution choices for DC Comics, effectively there's less. Instead of 1 national monopoly, there's now 2 regional monopolies on DC Comics and 1 national monopoly on everything else. All right, context. I'm not sure how much you're keeping up on all that stuff in the industry, so I wanted to recap it for yourself and for the audience. Now, what's the Didio take?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's difficult and probably a little improper to comment on business decisions after you left, primarily because you're just not. While you might have a contextual understanding of things beforehand, the world has been affected and changed so much. But I know that just on a personal level, the people in charge of DC have a true love of comics and a true interest in comics, so they're trying to do what they think is best. So it goes without saying they're making the choices they feel are the right choices at the right time. The only thing that I can say really. Yeah. Okay, go for it. So you say. You
I was just going to say, you can comment on this or not. You can say you can't comment on it or whatever, but was there thinking about this weakness of the monopoly and distribution in DC? Was that a topic of discussion in DC when you were there?
I think it was a topic of discussion in the industry, not just DC. Everybody was trying to look at where else they could go, or what was going to happen, or if there was a problem with Diamond or someone else. You always have to have contingency plans in everything that you're doing, especially if you're relying on a single source. So I imagine that everybody in every company had a backup plan, of what they were going to do if something ever happened that upset the business. I have to believe it. Just the way it works if you're running a competent business.
So at a similar time, though, DC also announced their whole digital first initiative. Okay. Yeah. So whether that's in response to COVID or not, or whatever, how do those things tie in together to you? And what is the signal that sends to you about what
the question is? The question is distribution. The question is, where is the audience? You're never going to find out where the audience is unless you start to put product into places where you're doing it. And again, it goes to my discussion back to Walmart. If you're going to really try to find out the true worth of a distribution, you have to put your best product out there to see whether or not it attracts anybody and who it attracts. Are you attracting younger readers, the same readers, whatever? Is it just the same group just migrating from place to place?
But is it the distributor's job to attract readers?
No, it's just a channel. It ultimately comes down to, listen, there's 2 things I'm going to say to you. Okay, 2 things on this whole thing. Because naturally I think about these things. The first one is that if anybody thinks the business as it existed before COVID is going to be the same business after COVID, you're wrong. Something's got to change. The world's changing. You have unemployment, you have a break in the distribution system, you have people unable to mix and meet in the ways that they traditionally do. I think the thing that's going to hurt comics even more than distribution is the loss of conventions, which is probably one of the biggest things, gathering spots for all of our fans. And not only that, a lot of small independent publishers make their wear at these shows. They're selling more product at a convention than they are through any of these distribution systems. Yes. So that's going to have a bigger impact. So the convention system falling apart is a bigger concern than the distributorship. So that's the first one. But the idea is that
I had not heard that or considered that take on it for sure.
Well, think of the number of people that are passing through these shows on a monthly basis. Think of the number of shows and how many people do it, and then think of how many books are being sold in the comics. Then think of these small publishers and people who are selling their wares, or even a bigger publisher supplementing his sales by setting up these giant kiosks selling books. To these shows.
Not to mention original art and commissions and all of that.
The level of awareness that goes on with that is, essential to the strength of the business. And that is an industry business that just shut down, and with no outlet to replace it. And I think that's a detriment. And that's something that people can say, "Oh, we're going to create virtual conventions." You'll never get that same experience.
Yeah,
it
doesn't work. That doesn't work.
We're doing it. Next month. There's no San Diego Comic-Con next month. Yeah. That is our highlight showcase, the comic book business, regardless of how much it's about comics anymore. It is still the focus is on comics. And the fact there is no San Diego Comic-Con in July, you're shutting off one of your greatest promotional tools for your industry. So that's got to have some level of impact. Okay.
I got to agree with that, Dan. Okay. So thank you. That's I don't want to probe too much deeper unless you have additional thoughts about distribution. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm just going to say the one last thing. So I said that's the one issue, and I'm going to go to the second one.
Oh, yeah.
Content is king. If you make a book that people want to read, they will find it. They will read it digitally. They will read it in print. They will read it off a toilet sheet if they could. They will find a way to read a book if they want to read a book, and they love it. So the trick is, you just can't keep on turning out things over and over again with the hope that people are just going to pick it up, because that's the way it's done in selling through inertia. This is the moment in time where you have to do a complete reevaluation of your product line, of who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, where do you really want to be? And you asked me this question, I'm going to put it back. Now you got to go to the industry and go, what does this industry want to be when it grows up? It's got to put on its big boy pants right now, and it's got to be something more than it was. Stop taking people for granted. Stop taking your fans for granted. Go out there and sell books that people want to read and get excited about and want to talk about, and get the focus back on the characters and story again. You do that, comics are around, stores are around, doesn't matter who the distributor is, you're in great shape. You don't do that, they're going to go find something else to read, they're going to go find something else to do, and they're going to find out, and then you're just going to sit here selling variant covers and call it a day.
Dan, that's what we talk about when we say tell the truth. So I appreciate your honesty and your candor on that. But now, wait a second. It's time. Speaking of honesty and candor. I can't leave. It's time, baby. So I've revealed the comments to you. If you go up there in that corner, there's a little thing that says comments, and it's got like a big red zillion numbers. There's comments in there. I'm going to look through them. Guys, your old comments are what they were. If you want to ask some questions now is your time to write some questions for Dan.
What am I going to live comments? Is that what I'm doing?
Well, no, you don't even have to go there. I will pull them up on the screen for you, but you can look through there. But guys, let's get some good comments from Mr. Didio. There were a couple in here. I'm going to go back through and look. We've got some luminaries and celebrities of the comic book world tuning in to watch us as usual. Let's see if we can pull someone up. Oh, here's your old pal. Somebody we mentioned on the show. Let's see. Who else? I'm not seeing too many interesting comments in here. Let's see.
There you go. I don't generate interesting comments. There you go. I knew it. Always knew it.
A lot of sniping, a lot of arguing, a lot of infighting about this and that, and social justice this and Nazi that. And
who cares? Comic books. I'm talking comic books.
Honestly, unless you got something, guys, about the industry, we got Dan Didio here, who's like a pretty big deal. It was in the industry, is in the industry, still is going to be part of the industry in the broader sense of the entertainment. This guy's not out of it. I could tell you that, man. So
always
these guys are saying read the super chats, but I flashed up most of the super chats. There wasn't anything too great there. Guys, I'm shutting down this comments thing right now.
Wow, that's gonna be good.
Unless you ask some interesting questions, I'm not going to bring them. What I'm going to say, Dan, is you've been a great sport here tonight. You answered pretty much every question I put at you, and offered some really interesting opinions. I hope, one, that you will watch this show again. and check it out.
I subscribed.
Okay. Well, thank you. And maybe you'll even come back on in one of our panels. We have these mixed industry panels where we bring in, you know, publisher types and wonk types. I think that's what you are now. You've like graduated, like you're out of office and now you're like on CNN as an analyst now.
I'm an analyst. I don't know. Yes, yeah, I have a senior advisor position.
All right. So anyway,
somebody called me an elder statesman. I don't know if that I was offended or not. I'm not sure yet.
Oh, here's one. Here's a great one. Hey, hello to both Dans. Mr. Didio, how's it working with Pittsburgh colorist Jason Wright? He's our cover artist for Heroinberg Comics. These guys,
he's killing it, man. Oh, you know what? It's funny because I never talk. I rarely ever talk about my own stuff, so I have to always go out there because I've been working with Shane Davis and Jason's just done. We're putting him through the ringer on that book, and he brought the color and the scope and the depth. You know what? I mean, it was interesting to see that because we did something back in the day when really turned to computer coloring and we got to the glossy paper. We really wanted to make sure the colorists shined. And you see cover credits on for the colorists now. They get royalties now and things like that. Rightfully so, because they are adding so much to the art and so much to the style of these books that they're just really just, you know, they're really so integral to everything going on, and good color can make or break a book. That's for sure.
So these are comics from the commenter here, Heroinberg. They're out of Pittsburgh, which is where I was born, and so they've sent me some comics, and we're going to be reviewing these pretty soon. I'm going to have a roundup show. We're going to put these on the middle.
Good stuff. Good luck with them too. I always I love you guys breaking in. You know, I miss that at conventions. I used to go table to table and buy a book here or there. You know, for
I paid $2 just to say thank you for the work that you did on DC. Enjoyed your books. Thanks, Dan. Isn't that nice when you get some positivity on the internet?
And this is going to sound hokey, but I like to thank everybody because sometimes we're creating things in a vacuum, and you're in there and you're working, and when you see that level of a response and the visceral reaction of people excited or not excited. I used to say, and that's my big thing, is that I didn't care if a fan was excited or angry. I just wanted them to evoke an emotion, because apathy is what kills comics. It's that loss of interest, not even caring about them, and you want to do it, you know?
Okay, Dan, here, John V, he's one of our great regular commenters. Any creator that you really wanted to work with but didn't get a chance to or couldn't make it work?
Yeah. The fanboy in me always wanted to work with Alan Moore. I mean, that goes without saying.
Well, you went to the wrong company, Dan. Sorry, buddy. That's sailed. That's
and it's funny because Jim had an opportunity to work with him a lot during his days at Wellstrom, and I have some guys that used to work with him. Allison Gill, who's in charge of production, used to be in charge of Marvel UK, so she tells us great Alan Moore stories. I have a book autographed by Alan Moore, but I do not have. I've never had a chance to meet him personally.
Me neither, man. I've got my feelers out to get him on this show. Believe me. Come on, Alan Moore. I bet you're watching. Yeah. Oh, wait. Here's from one of your former acquaintances that we mentioned. I think this is a legit question, so I'm going to put it up there. This is Ethan Van Sciver's YouTube channel. So does AT&T love publishing comic books as much as you did? Do you feel there's any kind of love or whatever? Or is it just dollars and cents? Like, are they viewing DC characters as pure IP?
Here's the thing. Let me say to you: when you start assigning emotions to corporations, I think you're making a mistake. I think, you know what I mean? I think what you have to realize is that corporations and businesses have a single purpose in mind, and everything is built to service that purpose. And that's where we're at. It's people that matter. It's people. It's got to be the people who make the day.
Okay, wait a minute. Aha. Shaheen, refund the super chats. If you aren't going to read them, please. I work hard for my money. Guys, I told you how it worked. You gave your super chats. It had to be more. I can't even see the super chats anymore, the old ones, but I flashed up everyone on the screen that I could. Sorry, I'm keeping your $5.
Sorry.
Well, I will spend it on comics to review on this channel and talk about, because, man, that's what we love. Okay. So, Dan, we've this is great for you viewer comments. You're a good sport. You answered enough. I'm sorry to you commenters out there. I always get people telling me I don't give enough justice to the comments or the super chats or whatever. I'm here to talk, and like I really got a lot out of our conversation tonight, Dan. I really appreciate you making the time. You didn't know me, you didn't know what you were in for, and you just came in here and you answered them. So thank you.
Yeah, no, listen. I strongly believe that we should be supporting any challenge. I think we've lost a lot we lost a lot of because the stores are closed at the moment or just opening up limited without the conventions. We lost a lot of magazines that used to really feed. You know, when I grew up, I was reading Comic Reader, Comic Buyer's Guide, you know, Amazing Heroes, Wizard, all these things just to have it. Nobody's coming back to your channel. Why? What did we do wrong?
I know, because wait a minute, yeah, because I'm getting in here. I'm a small ass channel with no respect for the people here. F you, Dan. That's to me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what I can do, guys. I'm trying to answer questions.
Wait, let me, guys. If you want to direct it at anybody, you can direct it at me. He's being very courteous to me and working for me. So if you're going to direct any of the comments, you can put them my way. I don't mind taking it. Okay, man?
I don't get the level of anger in these things. I don't get somebody who's so into comics. They're going to spend 2 hours listening to Dan Didio, and then all they got to say is, I'm sorry, garbage. Guys, I don't care about your super chats. I'll be honest. It's meaningless to me. You guys threw $20, $30 at me. Okay, thanks. I put them up on the screen. That's all I'm going to do. I'm sorry. I love my viewers. I love the comments. If you really want to engage, get in the comments after this thing is published, and I will answer comments. I answer the negative ones and the positive ones and everything in between. So please, sorry if you're not happy with my super chat action. Jeez, oh man, oh man. Anyway, Dan, I want to get out of here. Dan, you need to read the super chats. Go to the activities section of your live stream audio. I read the super chats. Anyway, I'm going to work harder on this. I'm going to figure this out. Dan,
we got to figure out Dan, and ask them to put down Dan 1 or Dan 2 because I'll address anything. Happy to be Dan.
If you got time, can you stick around for a second? I'll bump you. I'm going to just wrap this thing up.
Sure thing.
We'll get out of here.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. All right, guys. I get it. I'm sorry. I don't know. I can't. I did as much as I could on Super Chat. I'm going to try harder. I'll keep trying. I do love you guys. I respect my audience. There have been some comments lately that have gotten under my skin. I'm getting so many comments these days. The channel is blowing up. It's still small. 1,700 subscribers is nothing. But we got a really active, engaged group of people here. I had somebody say on my recent video, they went to me, Dan, what kind of outreach are you doing? All you're getting is these Comicsgate guys doing blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, my outreach is YouTube's algorithm. It's people that care enough to like comics and watch videos about comics and comment on them. I honestly appreciate all of your comments, man. I appreciate the negative ones and the positive ones. I don't hide from them. I don't shy away from them. I'm not a Comicsgate guy. But, dude, I'll talk to a Comicsgate person. I'll talk about this stuff. So I'm sorry. Oh, Ethan. Ooh, bad YouTube, brother. Sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry I don't have a bunch of sycophants sitting around telling me how great I am and hailing me so that I can talk about how much I hate liberals and whatever you hate. I don't care, man. You write your comics or whatever they are. I think you're a good artist, but come on. All right, guys. I got to get out of here. I got to go talk to Dan Didio. I really like talking to people about comics. That's all this is about, man. I get upset. I let this stuff get under my skin and it gets my goat sometimes. I'm trying not to. I'm going to maybe engage a little less in the comments and a little more, spend a little more time just reading good comics and talking about good stuff. That's all I can really do to make a difference in this universe that we're in, where people that love comics hate each other. That sickens me, dude. That sickens me in a way I have a hard time even expressing. Like, this is not a big enough industry for us to be poking at each other in this way, dude. We go read some comics, go get off your anger trip and go have some fun, dude. And please, thank you for watching this channel. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for clicking like or click dislike for all I care. I just thank you for engaging and caring enough to watch and be interested in comics, because just not enough people. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm rambling again, but I'm going to wrap this up now. I'm going to go talk to Dan Didio a little bit. And I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get back to my life and back to some comics. We'll see you next week with what? Oh my gosh, another amazing name in comics. We've got a whole panel next week. You know who Milton Greep is? Do you know what ICV2 is? If you don't know, then you really don't know much about the comics industry at all. I'm just going to say it. I'm just flat out going to say it. So you got a week to research it, because I'm bringing Milton Griep in here, and I'm bringing in Brian Garside from Manage Comics, and I'm bringing in Stu Colson from Comic Hub, and we are going to talk about the future of what this industry needs to order comics and pop culture material. Milton Griep has a whole new theory on the way we got to do it. Previews is a dinosaur. We got to pull it behind the woodshed and shoot it in the head, is what he says. So how do we replace it? Tune in next week. And then 2 weeks from tonight, holy cow, a true legend. And I throw that word around a lot sometimes. But man, I got Ron Turner. Ron Turner, the publisher and creator of Last Gasp, one of the most important comics publishers of all time. And I'm not just saying that because he's going to be on my show, because if you know anything about Last Gasp and Ron Turner, you know the guy is a true legend and has put out some of the most important and greatest comics of all time. Thank you for watching. I hope you tune in for all of those shows and all the clips and stuff that I'm going to be throwing out in between now and then. I thank you for your support of this show. I really, truly appreciate it. And we'll see you when? We're going to see you next time. Thanks for watching.